This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel.
Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your host, Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. Man, it's been a bit, hasn't it?
We took a little break,
Yeah.
which isn't unique from us consistently doing it, but it's been good, right? I think we just needed to recharge.
Absolutely. And I think, we thought, well, let's take a mini break, enjoy the summer with the kids. We went on a couple of vacations and we had a major storm, as you guys know. So recovering from that a bit, we said, we don't need to really create content right now, but let's get back on it. So we are back today and looking forward to the rest of the year, really. Kids are back in school and
first day.
Yeah, excited.
So what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to be talking about self-awareness and versus reading the room, right? And so I think that this topic actually came up this week on our L10 meeting, and I thought, hey, this would be a kind of a good topic to discuss and how you can maybe apply the self-awareness into your own life, maybe some practical tips.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we all continue to work on. I wouldn't say we're experts at this by any means, but
I think there's always room for improvement and something that I am continuously working on, and you are as well. So
So let's talk a little bit about what the difference and kind of we're talking. There's going to be many facets to this, but let's just talk about self-awareness versus reading the room.
I think to start, let's talk about the definition of what is the definition of self-awareness, right? Yeah. So it's understanding one's emotions, strengths, weaknesses, values, and triggers, and the importance of reflection and personal insight.
Yeah. So it's very introverted. Like you're looking at yourself.
Right.
You're looking at your reactions, your emotions, your triggers. I think, some of you and I work on it. When Joni triggers something, last night she triggered something.
Yes, I did.
I was like,
I'm like, what? I didn't do anything wrong. What's wrong?
So I had to become self-aware and be like, hey, Shawn, now that's stirring up inside of you. Be aware of those emotions. And I don't think she purposely meant to do that, and she wasn't aware. But also, I need to be aware that, hey, this, and then communication. So, hey, this triggered me, or this, you did this, and it bothered me, and then have
on both sides, 100%. We have to both be self-aware. I had no clue that I was even doing anything, right? So taking a step back and saying like, oh crap, like that bothered Shawn. Like, why did that bother Shawn? And being more self-aware of that.
Correct. So, but looking at it's difficult because a lot of times there's so much emotion, right? So sometimes it's hard to be self-aware and reflect when you got those emotions stirring and those.
And sometimes you just need to take a break to be, I need to think about this for a second, because I'm so pissed off that the next thing that's going to come out of my mouth is probably not a good thing, right?
So do you, we're going to get some practical tips, but on that particular topic, I don't personally do it. I wonder, you do more than I do. It's like, I guess I do personal time, or where I'll reflect. And I sometimes, that's what I brought up on the L10. I really hadn't, because what I discussed about the self-awareness and all that, we were talking about a particular individual or people in our organization, but it had just happened, right? It was like an hour, and I really hadn't had time to reflect. I like to reflect and replay the whole conversation in my head, because sometimes I get a different perspective from when I heard it the first time. I wonder,
replay it.
I start questioning, why was that said, or why was, and just small little things from I to we, stuff like that.
You analyze those things.
And, anyways, but do you journal? Do you reflect? What do you do?
I think
self-awareness?
I think meditating on it, journaling is great. I used to and I still do, and I probably need to do more of that. But I think getting your thoughts, out on paper on how you really feel. Sometimes it's really hard to communicate to the other person how you actually felt or why this bothered you, right? And so getting it out on paper and journaling it can help you get your thoughts and emotions out, so that way you can communicate it. So I love doing that because it helps me. And I think, it's practical advice for you. If you struggle with communication, you struggle to be able to translate that to the other person, try writing it out.
Yeah. And so, and then the difference between that and reading the room, what's the definition of reading
like
the room?
situational awareness, right? So the ability to gauge the emotions, dynamics, and reactions of others in social contexts, right? Importance of nonverbal cues, ambience, and energy. So knowing what other people are going through, like being, situational
So
awareness.
it's the exterior. It's what's going on others around. It could be just one individual. It could be a whole audience. It could be, but what's going on in whatever setting you're in. And so what we were talking about yesterday in the L10 was, hey, like, I think the best, you hear this all the time, is put yourself in their shoes. And I think that's the best way to really look at that, is put yourself from their perspective, put yourself in their shoes and see how would they, if you were really them, how would you react if you said it this way? Or how would you react if you use this body language? Or how do you think they perceive that? And there's, there's different ways. And you can see when you're having conversations, people, body languages change. Like you might
body language is huge. That's and that's how I read. When you talk about reading the room. For me, that's how I read the room. I look at emotion. I look at energy, right? Because if you truly know that person, you know when they're off, right? Because you can feel the energy. You see their, nonverbal cues, they're rolling their eyes or, whatever it is, that there's something wrong and you need to cue into that, right? And stop and say, okay, like, maybe I need to ask them, like, what's wrong?
Correct. And I guess I struggle with this, where I was thinking of it was as a parent. There's times where I will, I got a really important message, right? And somebody might even, or one of my kids ask me for my opinion, right? Sometimes majority of the time I give my opinion without them maybe asking, or a lot of people, but not just my children. But so if they ask for my opinion and I give it, and then or I start to give it, right, and I see that their body language, like I'm offending them, because, and then and to me, it's like, hey, I'm just being truthful. You asked for my opinion. I'm just laying down the truth. But yet there's a line that was crossed, right?
Right.
And to me, it's like, I don't know, like it's hard because I'm wondering about how there's times where people offend me, right? And go through it. And I try to process that and learn from it. But do you recommend, like, I guess, like with your children, you would want to maybe watch that line, watch that body language, watch if you've upset them, and then try to build them back up, right? Not just tear them down even more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And each child is different too, right? Because they, like, both of ours, like, I mean, we can be hard on Mila and she'll take it. Yeah. But Lucas, on the other hand, like he's a little bit more, on the emotional side. So there's a fine line. So I think you have to learn how to read them and know, like, when to pull it back.
Yeah. Something I heard on another podcast that I thought was really cool with that, I think goes along with some of this reading the room. They were mentioning that in most circumstances, when you're really trying to read the body language, read the cues of somebody, or trying to have influence, you need to spend some time with that person. And so, so like, in other words, if you need to know their patterns, their behavior, and spend more than like an hour with somebody to know, it's like determining, like, if they're being honest with you, if they're giving you correct feedback, to you, or car salesman, whatever. Like you can tell when somebody's being truthful or being honest with, and having a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a trustworthy conversation, or honest conversation. When you know them, you know their tendency, you know how they act, and if they do something that's totally uncharacteristic of how they typically act, then you know something's up. They're
right.
They're not being true to who they are.
And honestly, I think where this comes from is active listening, right? Because I think a lot of us, like, we don't listen to what the other person is saying and really studying what the other person is saying, right? And I think if you just slow down a little bit and just listen and do more active listening, then you will figure out quickly how this person, reacts and what their emotions are like, what their, how they handle things.
Yeah.
Right. But just practicing more active listening.
And just on these two subjects, is there a time or moment where self-awareness significantly impacted like a decision you made or something impacted you?
Not a decision, but I think that, when I went through the fitness competition, right? Because when going through that, all my priorities were getting through the competition, making like eating right, working out, all of those things, right? But what I wasn't aware of was my family dynamics. And, what I was going through, everything that I decided to do affected my family, affected with you, my relationship with you, and affected my children because they needed mom, right? And so like, I didn't realize that until like after the competition, like Joni, like just because you were in this competition doesn't mean like life stops there. You have other obligations that you need to take care of.
Yeah.
And so if anything, it taught me that, okay, yeah, you need to be more aware of that and how others are feeling, because I totally like missed that.
It's hard because I mean, in one aspect, you're like, hey, I'm challenging myself. I'm doing something big here. Everybody should support me.
And that's the one thing is it's all about me instead of looking at it the other way and
correct.
saying, you know what, it isn't about me. Like, I'm doing that for myself, but at the same time, like I still have obligations and I still have to be there for my family.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad you're self-aware of that now. If we ever do that again. So what when you're like speaking on stage or doing a presentation, how do you normally assess, the mood or dynamics of the group? What do you like? What are you looking? Are you at a point in your speaking career or presentation where you can really, not just worry about your presentation, the dynamic, giving a good presentation, but also start looking at reading the room? What are you looking for?
Yeah,
engaging with them.
I'm still learning. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not like this. I can get up there and speak, right? We went from me like being terrified to be on stage to, okay, I'm comfortable enough to be on stage to getting through my presentation. Now, the next step, is to focus on, okay, like reading the room. What's the emotions in the room? Like the energy level, like, that way, like if they're like, the speaker in front of you and they're bored out of their mind, like, okay, like I need to kick it up. I need to ask more questions. I need to kick it up because I want them engaged, right? And so learning to kind of read the room and look for emotions and, nonverbal cues, those kind of things is what I look for.
Do you know of a situation where you ever misread? Could be an individual, could be a room, it could be a small group that you thought you maybe misread it, or did that?
I mean, there's been times where, I've assumed like this person, like had an issue with me personally, like, their energy and everything is different around me. And so then I took it as, that person doesn't like me anymore or whatever it is. And that was not right. They were actually going through a tough time in their life. Right. And so instead I should have been, all right, like, hey, stop and say like, hey, something's different here. Like, you're not the person that you normally are. Is everything okay? Right. Instead, I assumed that it was me and stopped talking to that person because I thought, well, they didn't like me. So why am I going to, make an effort there? But what they really needed was me to check in on them.
Mm-hmm. So that's an instance of relationship, because reading the room is also about relationships. So like that would be more relationship and more asking questions than and assuming
and not making it about you, right? Yeah. Again, I was trying to make it about me. Like, well, what's wrong with me? What did I do? It didn't even relate to that. It was because this person was going through a hard time and they needed that friend, and I wasn't there to be their friend.
That's a great example. So thank you for that. Let's talk about some of the differences, right, between the two. We've gone over a lot already, but Again, self-awareness is inward focused. Reading the room is more outward focused. Self-awareness it aids to more personal growth, emotional regulation. And I think that's something that I think is important within any organization. So I think if you're running, an organization, I think it's important so we do a lot of self-development, improvement, books, discussions, workshops for our organization. A lot of times it's around this self-awareness, right?
100%.
Because it's so important. I think it's one of the biggest struggles with people. Would you say people are getting less self-aware or more? I don't know, or about the same?
About the same. I mean, it depends. I don't know. Like, we a couple of years ago, the leadership team that we had, right? Like, there is one individual. Like, you can pick out the one person that is not self-aware, right? And so, I think there's, I don't know, it's hard to say. Like, I think, if you want to be honest, probably less.
I mean, it's a struggle,
yeah.
and I think it's something that, the emotional part, right, can just totally blind somebody. To really looking at their self and how they play a role in it all. Yep. It's always, what is everybody doing to me, instead of, hey, how can I help this situation, or and it might
what could I do better next time? Yeah. Like, they're not taking accountability for, their mistakes. We see that sometimes where, man, you can just be aware that, this, we're not getting on you and you're not going to get fired over it, but hey, step up and say, crap, I made a mistake, right? But what could I do better next time?
Yeah. And I was going to say with that, being self-aware, I think a lot of times is just more than anything is there's so many things in the world you cannot control, right? And we're talking about reading the room, but there's sometimes, like, in certain situations, you can't control what the other person says, responds. You can only control the way you handle the situation, right? Because you're only in control of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing is, so, like, I think being self-aware is really looking at yourself and how do I respond in that situation when somebody says something wrong, when somebody is giving you criticism. Are you going to get defensive and pissed off and angry?
Some people are not just willing to listen to that because they honestly don't think they've done anything wrong. Correct. Right? And so, or
they don't think anything's wrong with it.
Exactly. And so they have to be, again, that it's part of self-development, is that you have to be willing to put your ego down and say, you know what, I'm open to the criticism. I'm open to being able to improve this side of my life. And if you're honest with yourself, you would ask for feedback if you don't know what's wrong with you and you want to change,
go to somebody.
You need to ask somebody for feedback, a loved one, somebody that you trust. Hey, what do you think about me? Yeah. What do I need to improve on? What do you see? Right? It might not be
open to hearing
exactly. You might not like it, but being open to hearing that is the only way, you can really change. And so if you're not sure.
So that, because there's, I think, a lot of people that would say somebody gives somebody feedback, right? And you might say, and you got to watch who it's coming from, right? Sometimes it's from somebody that just wants to tear you down.
Right. That's why you got to know it's got to be somebody that you love and trust, and that somebody's, you respect.
Right. So it doesn't mean you have to be defensive, angry. You can be self-aware. You can self-meditate. You can
journal.
You can reflect on it to see if that's really the case. You can get another person's opinion. Somebody that's totally unbiased or not part of the conversation, and ask their opinion, right? And but be aware to I think they could be totally off base, but there's still always something you can improve on, right?
Yeah.
There's still always. So I think always you can look at yourself. Hey, I always try to put in perspective something I would tell myself is hey, I might not 100% agree with what they just told me or what they said, but if that's the way
they're saying it,
if that's the way they see it, or that's the way they took it, then there's something I can work on, right?
Right.
I mean, I obviously said it in a way or in a tone or a body language or that they took it that way. That wasn't my intention, or that maybe wasn't what I was trying to get across at all. But if that was the way it was received, then I need, or perceived, I need to I need to watch or understand or do it in a different manner, right?
I agree.
I think
100%.
there's always a way we can work.
Yep,
Yeah.
always.
And how are they interconnected, Joni? So like, I think, being self-aware helps you read the room better, right? So,
I mean, I think that if you're self-aware with your own emotions and you personally, like, then it just makes you you can read people better, right? How can you read somebody else if you can't even read yourself?
Yeah. And
understand. Right.
Yeah, correct. I'm trying to think of instances where I read, I think there's times where if you're giving a speech or something like that, you can really tell when people are engaged and people are laughing at your jokes, or you're
I mean, practice and like eye contact, right? Like, man, like I use that like to the T. Like anytime I talk to somebody, like I am like focused on them. I'm not talking and like looking all over the place. Like I'm focused on them. I'm focused on what they have to say, right?
And I like the questions you ask. You do a lot of questions and engaging with the.
Yeah, but I think it just makes you, even in sales, that's, crucial, is like learning how to read the other person and making that eye contact with them, right, throughout the process. Because I've had sales guys, like, car salesmen that, like, didn't even care to hear what I said.
Yeah.
He bought I remember the Range that I bought one year, like I went back for service and he's like, "Oh, how long have you had the car?" I'm like, "You were my salesperson. Do you not remember?" Like,
it was like a month later.
Like a month ago that you sold me this car? Like, how do you not realize that, right?
That was yes, they had a lot of learning to do. Joni gave them sales books to the sales manager and like you got to read this because obviously your people don't get it, and then your people need to read it.
I forgot about that. I remember giving him sales books.
Because it was just bad all the way around. I can't believe we still bought some. Let's talk about some practical applications. So, what are some practical ways or skills that have helped you in your career or personal life with self-awareness? Like we went over.
I think we went through that. Active listening, right? I think that is key right there, is learning how to listen more. Like, quit talking, shut up. Like, shut up and listen to the other person, right? Genuinely get to know the other person. And then for yourself, I think like asking for that feedback, journaling, meditating. All right, like, how can I be more connected with my emotions to know, or what are those triggers, right? We talked about triggers earlier, and up until like a couple of years ago, like I started practicing more of my triggers. All right, like what's triggering that emotion, right? And if you know what triggers it, then you can catch it quickly.
Know when it attacks, and be self-aware that, hey, this emotion is this triggered from this, and now I know how to calm it down, or know that it's not something that needs to grow into something larger than it needs to be. Yeah.
Right. And in your organization, I mean, I think that, like we practice self-development in our organization. Like we're constantly reading books, and we're constantly working with our leadership team. We're constantly working with our mid-level managers, right? So they can also be more self-aware.
Yeah. And some common challenges, which we've talked a lot about that already. I think that the biggest with people that face in developing these skills is it causes you to look at yourself, and it causes you to be vulnerable. It causes you
vulnerable. Oh, I like that. Yes, that's
so it causes you to really put your insecurities, ego, everything out there, and work on it. And I don't think a lot of people that's something where people want to hide.
Right. And they're afraid to hear what other people have to say about them. Right. And so.
And not get defensive. But ego is a big portion of it. We all have too much ego and don't want to admit when we're wrong and got a lot to work on. So I think that's the biggest challenge with developing these skills, and why people probably don't is because it's just they don't want to admit that they have something to work on. So Anything else you want?
Awesome. No, this is a great episode, guys. Hopefully you got something out of this this week. And yeah, it's
Yeah. So we just have one ask. If you could please share it. We post it on YouTube, all our social media accounts. But if you see it, please share it with your following, your groups, and do a hashtag self-aware podcast for us.
Love it.
Yeah, we would love to check that out. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please email us at info@insidethewolfsden.com. So otherwise, we'll see you all next week.
See ya, everyone.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there. Talking. But Joni and Shawn are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at insidethewolfsden.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.